man, a guy who's been the 10th person who's walked around the world. And I don't know why you walked so many extra miles, because you walked 10,000 more miles than was required to qualify for the Guinness Book World Records.
I'm an overachiever.
Is that what it is?
No.
So why'd you walk 10,000 extra miles?
It was just the route. It was just how it was. I wanted to see every continent, and that, was what it entailed,
But you came up one short.
Yeah, I came up one short because of COVID. And at that point when COVID struck, I had been on the road for, I guess it had been 5.5 years. Yeah. And then I kind of meandered around Turkey for a little bit. And then I got into Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan when they opened up. But my original route was to go up to Kazakhstan and Mongolia, and then to Australia. With COVID, it just wasn't happening. And Australia was very strictly closed. And I had already waited around a year just to get into Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. I was like, I'm not going to wait around another year. I've been out here for 6.5 years. I'm tired. I'm going to go walk from Seattle to New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. So 2015 to 2022, you end up writing a book about it, which we'll talk about, the World Walk. I was like, man, this guy's creative, man. How did he come up with that name?
Nice, simple name.
But 7 years. And I read some of the interviews that someone from CNN and The Guardian and stuff had done, and just all the typical questions. But when you were going to come in, I thought about this, like, why does a guy do it? And I know there's a story. A couple friends passed away. But you're 17 years old when that happens, when the idea strikes you, probably contemplating life and what are you going to do. But then there was a gap between you when you actually did it.
Yeah, long gap.
So what eventually causes a guy? Because I could think of a lot of other hard things that aren't this level hard. What causes a guy to do this?
I couldn't think of any better alternative. That was honestly it. When I was 17, like you said, I had two friends who died, and it was very formative. And I thought about, what do I want out of life if I'm going to go at any moment? The thing about Anne-Marie, which maybe you read about, but for me, it was that she was the nicest person I knew, like by a mile, my whole life. And then she died in this very freak jet ski accident, and it was very arbitrary. And so I think part of why it was so impactful for me is I was 17, but then also she was just so clearly always better than I was, just a better person, a better student, better in every way. And so that was the real kicker, where it wasn't just, oh, I could die. It was like, oh, someone that is much better than I am can die in a moment's notice. So that knocked me off balance. And then, watched Dead Poet Society, discovered Carpe Diem, all that, latched on to everything like that. And I really really reflected on, okay, you get one shot of this. What do you want? I ultimately came to the answer, wanted to travel, wanted to be forced into adventure, because at the time I was very timid. I was very introverted and wanted to grow out of that, wanted to understand the world. I didn't have any money, so I was looking for cheap ways to travel, discovered Steve Newman, Carl Bushby. This is the story. And that idea just lodged itself in my head, where it seemed to fulfill everything I wanted. And then as 8 years went on, I went to college, was working through college, and then after school, ended up breaking up with the long-term girlfriend to, give the walk a chance of happening, living at home, working, saving, paying off loans, all these things. I think what it came down to was this dream that I had. It wasn't an arbitrary dream. It wasn't just, I want to be famous. I want to, make a ton of money. It was something that for me was critical to my existence. It was so deeply value-based in, you get one shot, what do you want out of it? That when I really played out these alternatives, I go, okay, you could move into Philly, get a 9-to-5 job, like have a pretty enjoyable life. All my cousins live there. Got a lot of friends there. It would have been great. But when I actually played that out, versus like having this great adventure out into the world and growing and being challenged and being pushed to my limit, that was, an easy decision for me, even if it took 8 years of saving and if it meant living off of rice and beans for 7 years. So for me, there wasn't any alternative.
So there's all kinds of other things, like some people choose to climb Mount Everest. It feels like a similar thing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take 7 years.
I think the Everest thing also though is like a little bit check the boxy. I mean, I understand it for people, and maybe that's just like the nature of mountains because there's a bunch of mountains, and you want to hit every.
They probably climbed a lot more before that one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for like very wealthy people now, they just get a Sherpa and just that hauls their stuff up, and that's like, oh, I did this thing, so you can say you did it. And the 7 years, yeah, it's a long time, but it was never about you know actually becoming the 10th person to walk around the world. It was that I wanted to live this type of life, and walking around the world is a way to fulfill that. So it was that, again, that like just kind of, this is what I valued, and that was the only way I could figure out how to do those things when I was broke and I was paying off my student loans. And I'm not an explorer. So I was like, oh, just walk out my front door and go figure it out. If I had other skills, if I had more money, I probably would have traveled in a different way. But this was just how I wanted to live.
A lot of times when I know about making a plan, because in life, it is good to make a plan. You don't want it to be boring, but hey, if you have a destination you want to arrive at, you need to make a plan. But what I know about every plan I make is it doesn't go exactly to plan. So throughout this 7-year journey, did it end up being what you thought it would be?
I really tried to go in with very few expectations because in a certain way, I knew nothing of the world. And so I'm just going to go out there and let it pass through me. And I think the only thing I expected was adventure and to be really pushed and then to grow a lot. And it definitely fulfilled all those things. But also, I think in a certain way, it was much more reassuring of humanity, I think, than I could have expected, because so many people were so generous to me. Everywhere I went, people would give me water, give me food. They'd offer me a place to stay. If I was camped out somewhere on someone's land, they never said a bad word to me. They said, okay, you can stay here, and then, or you can come in and, be gone in the morning, kind of thing. So in those ways, it was like unexpected, went to plan, those bigger things. But the day to day, that's just like you said, the best laid plans are out the window constantly. And so you're living with this constant change. And from the very beginning, the initial plan I had was, I had these bike maps that I'm going to follow down all the way to Florida. This would be great. I got the whole thing mapped out. Like the second day in, I got to Valley Forge in PA. I got off the protected trail, and then it took me on these harrowing, windy Pennsylvania roads where I almost died like 3 times. And so I just tossed those maps and go, okay, well, that doesn't work. Now I got to figure out where I'm going to walk. And then I was walking these really big roads, which are loud. And so this is a trial and error. And then I was cramping and I was losing toenails and I was getting a ton of blisters, and the shoes I used weren't working, wasn't carrying enough water. There's just a million little things like that. And then as the years went on, I ended up getting incredibly good at just knowing exactly what I needed from each place. And even like something as simple as finding a place to sleep each night, where in the beginning, it's very stressful. And one of the things I learned maybe about a month in or so, maybe less than that, was like, okay, I'm going to give it 2 hours. And I just wasn't good at finding a place to sleep, to like hide away. And so I give it 2 hours before sundown. That gives me 6 miles. And the first place I see, I'm just going to go camp there. And that's it. Because sometimes I'd want to push on further. And so you can't do that. You can only cover 6 miles, find a place, hide away for the night. And as you get into different countries, the density changes, the culture changes. Sometimes people are out longer, and I end up like picking up all these little tricks and really enjoying kind of this puzzle that I had to solve every day to find a place to sleep. And when I found a good place to sleep, it was like the greatest reward, because I'm exhausted and I can fully relax. And maybe I'm in the middle of a forest.
What made a good place to sleep? Like when you really knew it. Say it's like a couple years in, you just knew it.
Yeah,
explain that.
It's where no one's got a sight line of you. You're not on anyone's property. That's the key, because when you're on someone's property, it's always slightly in the back of your head. Even if you're just on the edge, it's like you just don't want to be on someone else's property, or the property's so massive that they're not going to notice. Like, okay, that's fine. It's quiet. There's no noise, or very little noise. The main thing, there's no sight lines, probably on a hill, because if it rains, then you're not going to get rained out, anything like that. And no mosquitoes. That would be great. But the main thing, the really peace of mind, is that like no one's going to find you. And you go, okay, I'm well hidden. And Also, I learned that you can get away with being well hidden, just like not far off the road, especially in America, because no one goes outside at night. Everyone's watching TV. Whereas, say, like in Morocco, I would have these. I was walking northern Morocco, and a lot of it.
Like not Tangier. I've been to Tangier.
No, not
Like
Tangier.
Marrakesh
I
and
was
all that.
Tangier Med. Tangier
Okay.
Med, though. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was close.
Yep.
I was a little bit further to
South.
the east.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And so it's a lot along the coast. It's kind of these plateaus and then these really deep valleys.
Mhm.
And I would hide in these little valleys, and I was like, "This is such a good spot. Like no one's ever gonna find me, and it's desert also, or like pretty dry. So I would just lay out my tarp and sleep there. And that's even more hidden, where someone walking by is not gonna see the top of the tent or anything like that. And also, I mean, eventually you get to the point where you realize, honestly, no one even cares. Like once I was 5 years in, I would just camp wherever, and then realize no one cares. Like they're probably more afraid of you than
Who's this
the
crazy
other way.
person?
Yeah, exactly. So then you really relax. But at the time, I was like, oh man, I got a great campsite. But then people were just out all the time, and so that then you kind of just have to learn to relax. And but yeah, anyway, to get back to the uncertainty point is like that is just this uncertainty that you had to deal with every day and problem solve every day. But for me, it was just like this great joy that it's like this constant growth, and you get this really deep satisfaction every day that is pretty rare, I think, in daily life, where the results of your efforts are pretty removed, or you're working towards these really big projects where you could be grinding at your desk, whatever, 10 hours a day, making calls, but you don't really see the immediate results of something. But for me, I'd wake up, I'd walk a little bit further, I would feel the results in my body. And then if I had a good campsite, it's like big reward, and I earned that reward. And so it was a very satisfying life.
Did you know that you had it in you, that when you hit those first few tough days, toenails coming off, blisters, almost dying a few times in Pennsylvania, because you left New Jersey.
Yeah.
Even though for a normal person, for me, going from New Jersey to Pennsylvania on foot, it's a long way. But that was like a speck of sand in the whole scope of this whole journey. But did you know you had it in you to keep going?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, a speck of sand.
But did you know that in the beginning? In the beginning, you knew that when you faced hardship, you were going to keep going.
Well, I think part of it was that I had spent 8 years trying to make it happen. And so by the time it did happen, I was like on fire with the idea. I was so glad to be out there. And yeah, I was not going to stop for anything. But kind of just like that was 8 years of living at home and saving and paying off loans and all that. So by the time I was doing it, I'd already been working towards it for a long time.
I know you said that you were actively living. It wasn't just checking the box, like you lived this life. But did it feel like you came back to a changed world? Or were you living in the world as it was changing?
I don't know. I think it's probably more that I understand the world better. I probably hasn't changed that much. I mean, of course, it's in constant flux, and of course things are changing, but I think it's more a matter of I came back more changed than I was before. I saw the world in a very unique way, and I saw a lot of these places pretty deeply. And one of the things that traveling does for you, especially when you travel for a long time, is that you get a good sense of what places feel like, but then also what places do better than other places. And this is like any skill that you develop, say like with sales and you're in realty, you just learn the subtleties of what you're doing.
It's not sales anymore then.
Yeah, it's not sales anymore. And so, if you see someone that you're training up, you go, oh my God, making so many mistakes, that's just how it is. But it's very easy for you to point out, these things that are, could be improved upon. And traveling does a similar thing, but for like your own country, where you come back and you go, well, this place did this better, and this food is better here. And in a certain way, it makes you jaded, which is very, it's a tough trade-off, because traveling itself is incredibly enjoyable. But then when you come back to a place that's your home and you allow yourself to criticize, and also it's a great honor to be able to criticize your home country.
To be
able to, exactly. It's 50% of the world lives under an autocracy. And so that's a great joy, but it also kind of like adds to this a little bit of being jaded, honestly.
And it feels like you're missing out because you have a choice. You could go live that life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's something I like. Maybe the primary idea that I talk about in this motivational speaking I give is basically just live your one life. And because you can only live your one life, first of all, but once you accept kind of the limitations of your life, you relax primarily. And then also you're able to embrace, I called it like embracing constraints, where, there's limitations on everything. You're human. There are going to be limitations. But if you're able to accept certain constraints, say like marriage, you're married, that's a constraint. But the people who are married live longer, happier, healthier lives. At its best, you get to spend your life with someone who knows you better than you know yourself and still loves you somehow. Like, that's a great life. But
you don't seem like you're a rule follower. We're talking about following the rules now.
And no, not necessarily following the rules, but living within constraints because of the value they provide. I think so often the most common thing is to see a constraint or to see something like pinching you in a certain way,
an
obstacle in your life
from something.
And you go like, I got to find a way, to break this down out of this. I shouldn't have any constraints on my life. I want ultimate freedom. The whole thing was a constraint. I was away from my family. I was living out of a baby carriage. I, was eating peanut butter and jellies basically all the time.
You walked with a baby carriage?
Yeah, that had all my stuff in it. And so, that's like a constraint. I would get these ideas where you go, so this is a good example of a benefit of like a forced constraint or embracing a constraint, where I would be out there. And when I got into photography, which was months into the walk, I had no interest in photography before, but I'm out there and I'm trying to share it. And gradually, like I remember in Mexico taking a photo of a bull, and I looked, I was like, that's actually like a good photo. I was like, oh, I took that. That's weird. And then I started trying to take good photographs. And then I kind of fell into this joy of photography. And right away, the first instinct is like, I got to get a better camera. And really you don't. Like Steve McCurry, National Geographic photographer, will take a better photo with a cell phone than I ever would, or someone else ever would with
Why do you think that
gear.
is?
It's a skill. It's a skill. It's the same thing with sales. I mean, the guy, someone in sales could have the greatest sweater and the greatest tuxedo, whatever, not tuxedo, but the greatest
look the best.
But there's a lot more. It's the skill that goes behind it. It's the experience that goes behind it. And when you embrace certain these constraints, those subtleties get pushed, that they get forced on you, where you can't find the easy way out. And when you can't find the easy way out, you have to grow. And so it's the same thing, with my photography, where I had to wait a year and a half to get the next camera. And by then I was an infinitely better photographer. And then it was years on until I got another one. And so, yeah, I think it's something that you can like apply, where you just kind of stop looking for a way out and start looking more inward for the solution.
The way is through.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Always.
Very stoic. Yeah.
And it's always hard because it wouldn't feel like you had to go through it if you already knew. But I've always found like an easier, better life is always on the other side of going through it every single time.
The grass is greenest where you water it.
I guess so, right? Just embrace the hard, and that's tough. It seems like there's a lot of, because the world keeps on trying to systematize things for us to make things easier, and it's about teaching a guy how to fish versus giving them the fish and stuff. So you had to do a lot of going through over 7 years.